Afternoon. Time to continue with the sessions. If everybody could take their seats. The next session is on true partnership, giving and gaining value from every customer relationship. It's pretty well accepted that promotional product salespeople have to bring value to the relationship with their customers. But it's not always as clear to those customers should bring value to the relationship as well. That's what makes it a true partnership in this session. Dave Fellman will explain how to work both sides of the value equation effectively. The program begins with a clear understanding of what buyers view as value, and there's far more to that than a competitive price. It continues with an explanation of how your customers can provide value to your business and how to capture even more of that value that you may be getting now. David M. Fellman is the author of the Small Business Book, 10 Ways to Make Your Small Business More Successful, and also Listen to the Dinosaur, which Selling Power magazine listed as one of its 10 best books to read in 2010. His articles on sales, marketing, and management topics have appeared in a variety of publications, and he's a popular speaker who has delivered seminars and keynotes at events across the United States, Canada, England, Ireland, Australia, and New Zealand. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome David Fellman.
Thank you very much.
Hopefully I didn't take one of your sheets, and I almost did. Look at that. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon. I had an interesting experience yesterday that turned out to be relevant to what we're doing here today. I flew into Buffalo. I drove up from Buffalo, and I bet many of you have taken that drive across Grand Island. Did you notice if you're heading north, on the right side of the road, there's a bunch of low-slung, dark buildings, and these days they say R.R. Donnelley on the side. They used to say More Business Forms many years ago. I used to work for More Business Forms many years ago. And I was in those buildings once for I guess it was a regional marketing conclave, some sort of meeting where they brought in a bunch of the marketing staff people from all over the eastern region. And as we're sitting there in the room, the brand new regional vice president says to us, he says, "I'm concerned with whether our value proposition stands up in the marketplace." Then he looks around like, that was a question. And some of the veteran people in the room, they looked at each other, and then somebody started to talk about, how we bring all kinds of wonderful value to our customers, how we help them to make their businesses more effective. 3 or 4 people chimed in, and I was sitting there. One of the things that I kind of noticed was that nobody answered the question he had asked. And I realized that I had another more fundamental question, so I raised my hand and I said, "I'm willing to be the dummy in the room. What is our value proposition?" And it turned out that nobody actually knew. So I might ask you folks, what is your value proposition? How do you bring value? And I'm really asking, and I'm hoping that somebody will jump up to the microphone over there, and answer the question. There we go.
Personal service.
Personal service. So your belief is that the level of personal service that you provide represents value. Okay. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Jump right up to that microphone.
I'm kind of going through this right now myself, but I see myself in the people connecting business.
In the people connecting business?
Yeah. So I'm trying to connect people internally for my customers from an HR perspective, and externally connecting people to their brands. So I have to give things to these people, HR professionals and marketing professionals, tools to help them connect to.
So the product that you sell is part of the connector,
part of the connector.
And you're the motivating force for the connection?
Motivating, creative.
All right.
Force, yes.
And your belief is that this brings value to your customers?
Definitely.
Okay.
I mean, if you are an employee in an organization and I'm your boss and I give you something as a reward and it's totally cheap and ugly and something that you could never use, what does that say to how I value you?
All right.
How does that make you feel?
You make a good case for the value that you bring. Personal service, again, you make a good case for the value that you bring. But I do need to caution you about one important factor. Can we re-roll the tape a little bit to the introduction? Did you hear the part about Dave Fellman is a popular speaker who's presented a bunch of seminars, stuff like that? Who says Dave Fellman is a popular speaker? Well, yeah, I can say that. But have I convinced all of you yet? Here's the point I'm hoping to make. You've heard that line about beauty is in the eye of the beholder? Value is in the eye of the beholder. Value is determined by the buyer, not by the seller. Yes, we should have some idea of what we think we bring in terms of value. But be very careful about running around and telling people about that. Understand that, first of all, you got to prove it. And second of all, it really does have to be meaningful to them in order to represent something that they're willing to pay you for. And that takes me on to another part of this conversation. Value proposition, those two words. How many of you could any of you give me a classic textbook definition of a value proposition? I actually don't care if you could or if you couldn't, because I've read a whole bunch of them and they seem to be an awful lot of fancy words. Let me tell you what I think those two words mean, more than anything else in this business. A question first, have you ever found yourself in a situation where you're basically quoting on the same thing to the same person and your price is higher than the other person's price, the other distributor's price? Value proposition in 25 words or less is the reason or reasons that you think you are worth more money than those other people. That your presentation of the exact same product is worth more than somebody else's. And would you agree that if you really want to be successful in this business, you really want to be able to charge premium prices? And I'm not talking about, gouging people level premium prices, but I am talking about charging a little bit more than the really, really low price people, right? All right. I want to move on and I want to talk more about what they think value is, what buyers think value is, because I've done a bunch of research on that subject. But before I do that, I want to prove to you that I'm still willing to be the dumb guy in the room and ask the question, what is this?
Reusable straw.
This is a straw?
Yeah.
Wow. Breathe through it. Reusable straw. Okay.
You can breathe through it too if you'd like.
So we're watching TV the other night, going through the channels. My wife likes to do that, go through the channels. Drives me a little nuts sometimes. She found Dr. No, the first of the James Bond movies from 1962. Sean Connery playing James Bond. Sean Connery's like 30 years old playing James Bond. And there was a scene in that movie where he cuts off bamboo and uses it as a straw underwater to breathe. I don't need to do that because I got this. All right. It is pretty well accepted that you got to bring value to your customers. It's not always so clear that you should expect them to bring value to you as well, but that's what makes it a partnership, isn't it? Have any of you, by the way, ever been participants in something that you might have called a one-sided partnership? Yeah, I don't believe there's any such thing as a one-sided partnership. If it's one-sided, it's not a real partnership. Now, I've done considerable research on what buyers think. Promotional products buyers, printing buyers, sign buyers, those are the industry segments that I tend to do most of my work in. So over the years, and in a separate study, I did the research and I learned that these are the things that they think represent value. It starts with advice, it continues with familiarity, absolute honesty, price doesn't have a role to play, dependable quality, sensitivity, additional services, desire, flexibility, predictability. These are, if you will, the top 10 factors that represent value to people who buy what you sell. But I want to take you a little bit further into some of the conversations I had with these people and share with you some of the specific things that some of them said. For example, there was a woman who said to me, I buy a lot of different things for our company, and I'm not as knowledgeable about all of those things as I would like to be, or as my boss probably thinks I am. A lot of quote unquote, my ideas have improved our business, but I got to be honest with you, most of those ideas came from my suppliers. I want to buy from people who make me look good. More than just saying advice is good. Here's a specific example of how and when advice has been good for a specific buyer. Next on the list is familiarity. The more any supplier knows about our business and the way we do business, the better they'll be able to understand and be able to meet our needs. Next on the list is absolute honesty. This guy said, don't hide bad news from me and don't ever put me in a situation where it's the last minute and I don't have any options. If you can't do something, tell me up front or else tell me the very minute after you realize we've got a problem. By the way, folks, I know that you don't need me to read these to you, but we're recording this, so I'm kind of reading them for the soundtrack. I hope you won't mind. Price. This buyer said you don't have to have the lowest price, although you do have to be competitive. The more you give me in terms of value, our magic word, right? The more I'll be willing to pay. Hey, here's a question for you. You've got to be competitive. What does that mean? What does that mean? Is there any fixed point on a scale somewhere that says competitive? No, the truth of the matter is that competitive is a range, and it can be a wide range from person to person. But getting back to the idea of selling at premium prices, maybe the best way I can express that is to say we want to be on the high side of the competitive range, up near the top of the competitive range, not all the way down at the bottom where margins are really tight. Next on my list is dependable quality. This guy said, I want all my orders to look just as good as those samples you've shown me. How many of you use samples in your selling? How many of you bring whatever out there to show people without looking at it first to make sure that it's good quality stuff? Yeah, we don't do that. And they know that we don't do that. They know that we handpick the samples. They want their orders to look every bit as good as those hand-picked samples. Sensitivity. You got to understand that I don't set the deadlines. They're imposed on me by the people I work for. And I understand that I cause problems for you, when I need stuff turned around overnight. But you need to understand that when that happens, I'm really just passing along a problem that's been dropped in my lap. If you can help me solve my problem, I will love you. Next on the list, additional services. When I find someone I like doing business with, I want to do as much business with them as I can. You can't believe how excited I was when I learned that my website guy can also help me to design our catalogs. Think about that for a moment. How many of you believe that people buy from people they like? How many of you believe that people buy from people they trust? How many of you would agree with me that the trust part is more important than the like part? Yes? But how many would also agree with me that when you've got both trust and like going on, by bringing more products to the table, you're basically just giving the people who already like you more opportunities to show it, more ways to show it? Next on the list, desire. You can see the difference in service when a company really wants you as a customer. I've worked with some who never showed me that, and that's why I don't work with them anymore. Flexibility. The only constant in my business is how fast it changes. I need suppliers who can keep up with the change. Predictability. I want to know what I'm getting in terms of quality, service, everything. If I can count on that, I'm a very happy camper. So, that's the top 10 list. Any surprises there? No, there's no surprises there. But do you believe me when I tell you that salespeople and companies do not always provide all of these, or even most of these, or even any of these to the people that they're selling to and trying to sell to? If you are providing this sort of value, you're probably in good shape. If you're not, you got troubles. Now, I want to go back to the advice thing for just a moment. And I want to ask you, how many of you consider yourselves to be product knowledge experts? To know a lot about what you sell, about the realm of promotional products? How many of you? Show of hands, raise your hands. That surprises me. I would kind of expect every hand in the room to go up. Let me ask another question. How many of you consider yourselves to be marketing experts, merchandising experts, human resources experts, experts in the way that your products can be used to help people improve their own businesses? How many of you feel that way? Interesting. All right. I fear that what we've got going on here is a communications problem, maybe just a semantics problem, maybe just a question of definition. You all seem reluctant to present yourselves, to position yourselves as experts within this room, but I want to share with you my definition of being an expert, and then I'm going to ask the question again. Here's my definition. Whenever two people have a conversation, the one who knows more than the other one about whatever the hell it is they're talking about is the expert. By that definition, you feel better about being expert in these two things. All right, consider this. More often than not, you know more than the buyer about these things, which maybe means, which probably means, that your knowledge is the hub of the value that you can bring. Personal service probably includes that knowledge, right? The right tool for the job, the right promotional product for the application. All of that is a matter of what you know and what you've experienced. Now, I do want to throw one more idea at you. You know what people are buying for certain applications, right? I mean, you know what people are buying for sales meetings. You know what people are buying for fundraising. You know what people are buying for conventions and trade shows. You know that, right? Do you know? Do you know for sure whether it works for them or not? Whether they're happy with the result they get? And please understand that there's a difference between when the straw shows up and it looks the way you wanted it to look. That's one level of satisfaction, right? But the real issue might be, how well did this straw work as a giveaway? Did everybody know what the hell it was supposed to be? Should I be embarrassed, by the way, that I didn't know that? Yeah? Okay, fair enough. All right. Now that we know maybe a little bit more about you being valuable to them, let's talk more about making them valuable to you. And this is really the big part of what I want to talk to you about today. I'm pretty sure that you're conscious of the necessity to bring value to them. But I really wonder if you're focused enough on gaining maximum value from every one of your customers. See, I believe that every one of them, every customer, everybody that you're actually selling to, provides you with 3 levels of value. 3 distinct but interrelated levels of value. The first of which is the value of what they're buying from you now. The second level of value is the value of what they could be buying from you. And the third level of value is the value of influence, testimonials, referrals, stuff like that, the ways in which current customers can help you to build new customer relationships. So here's what I think. I think that you must protect the first level of value. I believe that you should maximize the second level of value. And I believe that you can leverage the third level of value. So that's what I want to talk about for the rest of our time together. Protect the level of what they're buying from you now, maximize the value of what they could be buying from you, leverage the value of influence. Level number 1. Protecting the value of what they're buying from you now is about 2 things. It's about customer service, and it's about customer contact. So let's start with customer service. And let me ask you this question. What exactly does that mean? Is it a fair statement that all of you endeavor to provide exceptional customer service?
Yes.
Okay. So what's that mean? What does it mean? Be available? That's certainly part of it. Quick response. What else fits in?
Do what you say you're going to do and when you say you're going to do it.
Do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it.
If there's an issue with whatever they've received, quality, you resolve the issue.
If there's a problem, resolve it, fix it. Yes?
Understanding what your customer needs.
Understanding what your customer needs. Oh, hey, here's a question for you. Is it your job to give them what they want or to give them what they need? Actually, here's the question. Is there a difference sometimes between what they come to you thinking they want and what your knowledge and experience tells you that they need? Yeah. If that's the case, would you agree with me that a professional salesperson, a professional promotional product salesperson, really wants to be delivering on the need more often than simply the want?
Yes.
Again, another reflection of your knowledge, your expertise, and the value that it brings. Here's another question, though. I need it by Friday. Is that a statement of need or maybe not?
Desperation.
Louder? It depends. What does it depend on?
Whether it's real or not.
Whether it's real or not. All right. I need it by Friday because I'm leaving for the trade show Saturday morning and I'm in real trouble if I don't have this thing. That's statement number 1. Here's statement number 2. I need it by Friday, even though I don't leave for the trade show until the following Thursday. I just, want to get this off my plate. Would you agree that that's a want?
Yes.
Do you have to meet the want if push comes to shove?
Set the expectation right.
You get the opportunity to set the expectation right. That's right. You get to at least ask if there's a little extra time available to get this thing done. By the way, rush jobs. Remember when 2 or 3 weeks was a rush job? Yeah, I mentioned more business forums. When I first started in the business forums industry 48 years ago, we were a 6-week industry. You placed an order and we brought it to you, we shipped it to you in 6 weeks. If you wanted it in 3 weeks, we could do that, but we would charge you 20% more. If you wanted it in like 1 week, God help you. Really, I remember being involved in some forms orders where the forms cost $1,000 and the rest charge was $2,500. One of the things that we deal with every day in almost every industry now is this whole instant gratification thing, because you can get so many things so quickly, that people want so many things so quickly. Let me suggest this to you. The next time somebody asks you for a quick delivery, a rush delivery, something that's going to stretch you or maybe stretch your suppliers, it's perfectly okay to ask them, if I need another day or so, would that be okay? Because I think you're going to find that most of the lies that our customers tell us are about the time frame. You know why they do that, don't you? Did somebody say they've been burned before? That's why they tend to do that. All right. I want to make sure that you do know, though, that there is a difference between needs and wants. Ultimately, you got to meet all of the needs. And you'll have the best relationships with your customers if you also meet most of their wants. But when those two things don't work together, just understand that one's an absolute and one may not be. All right, exceptional customer service. Maybe the best definition I've ever heard for that is to meet or exceed their expectations, which of course begs the question of what are their expectations in the first place? Knowing what they're looking for, knowing what they want, knowing what they need, telling them if you can do that and then doing it, or else telling them that you can't do that and maybe telling them what the best that you can do would be. Now, customer contact. Let's talk about where this fits in. Here's some very fundamental knowledge, very fundamental sales knowledge. It is never the buyer's responsibility to communicate with the seller. It is always the seller's responsibility to communicate with the buyer. That actually means two things. One of the things it means is it's not their responsibility to understand you. You know, when you say something, it's not their responsibility to understand. What that maybe means is be careful about speaking in jargon that the people that you're talking to may not fully understand. The other thing that it means, though, that is relevant to this issue is it's not their responsibility to stay in touch with you. It's your responsibility to stay in touch with them. Now, is it possible to stay too in touch with somebody? Oh yeah, it is. It's a fact. It's a truth that you can do just as much damage to a relationship by smothering them than you can by not paying enough attention to them. So the idea is to find the correct interval for making sure that you're in touch with the people that you need to be in touch with. So here's what I think we should be thinking about. How many weeks, let's say, can you afford to let go by without either you hearing from them or them hearing from you? What I'm actually recommending now, make yourself a list of your customers. This may not have to include your smallest customers, your very occasional customers, but it certainly wants to include your most important customers. Make yourself a list and establish an interval for each one of them. Again, some number of weeks that you will simply never again let go by without either you hearing from them or them hearing from you. Now, how many weeks? This is a function of how much they spend with you in the course of a year. It's a function of how frequently they typically order from you during the course of a year. What it's really a function of is you want to set an interval that is long enough that you're not smothering them, but it's short enough that it minimizes the possibility that something bad could happen, like a quality problem or a service problem or a competitor coming in with some insanely low pricing, minimizing the possibility that something like that could happen without you finding out about it. That's what we're talking about here. It might be a week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks. I don't know. I don't know what the correct interval should be. But I challenge you to set an interval for each one of your customers. And then, from this point on, you simply never let that number of weeks go by without either you hearing from them or them hearing from you. Now, if you're doing this right, you're probably not going to have to invent a whole lot of reasons to call them, because if you're doing this right, keeping in mind the typical frequency of their calls to you, of their orders, most of this interval is going to get covered by the regular back and forth of orders and business and communication. But you need to also have some way to remind yourself that it might have been too long since the last contact. How many of you use some sort of a CRM? Act, Salesforce.com, Microsoft Outlook. Does anybody still use paper calendars, tickler files, stuff like that? And I'm not critical if you are. I got no problem with using whatever works for you. But I do think it's important that you should have something to serve as a reminder that it might have been too long. I use a CRM called Act. I have 300 or so records in Act, various people that I sell to or have sold to or hope to sell to. And for all of the ones that I have actually done business with in the past, actual customers, I've set an interval so that Act reminds me 4 weeks, 8 weeks, however long. And I admit this to you, over the last couple of years in particular, as I've sort of gotten myself into a semi-retirement, I have to admit that I'm not as diligent as I used to be about getting all my data into my CRM. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had a reminder came up for somebody that I have on a 16-week cycle. I try and reach out to them every 4 months. The reminder came up, and I thought, oh man, I talked to her 3 weeks ago. I just didn't update my database. All right, no big deal. I bumped out 16 weeks from that point 3 weeks ago, just so I'll get a reminder to protect that interval that I've set in the future. Now, step one, set the interval. Step two is to have some means of reminding yourself. Step three is, what if it becomes time to make that call? All right, one of your customers, you haven't heard from them for a while. Please do us all a favor. Please don't ever call me up on the phone and say, hey, Dave, we haven't heard from you for a while. I get those calls, sometimes from my various suppliers. And I'll admit I may be overly sensitive, overly paranoid about this particular issue, but every time I get one of those calls, I feel like they're accusing me of cheating on them. We're not doing this to risk damaging the relationship, right? We're doing this to strengthen, to protect, to strengthen the relationship. So let's not make calls that only serve your issue. Let's remember that even on an interval call, even when it's time for you to reach out to touch one of your customers, it needs to be something that brings value. Not takes value, not something that just takes up their time just because you haven't heard from them for a while. So think about what sort of a call could you make that would bring some value to the relationship. How about this? Hey, Dave, I was thinking about you this morning, and it occurred to me that it might have been too long since I called you up and said thank you for your business. Can anybody think of any way that you go wrong with something like that? I was thinking about you today after the whoever beat the whoever yesterday. I was thinking about you because I know it's your birthday. How many of you, by the way, keep track of things like that? Birthdays, anniversaries, significant events, what their kids do, what their parents do. Only 2 hands went up. Do we not do that stuff anymore? If we do not do that stuff anymore, we are missing out on an opportunity to strengthen relationships. I'm not sure that remembering to say happy birthday brings a whole lot of measurable value, but I think it makes people feel good. Wouldn't that be enough? Shouldn't that be enough? Anyways, we want the calls to bring some sort of value. And that actually provides me with a transition into the second level of value, the value of what they could be buying from you. And the second level of value is also about customer contact. Yes, sir? Can I get you to jump up to the mic with a formal question?
I have a financial advisor that sends me a card that's been pre-printed by the organization, and it says happy birthday on it, and has a signature on it, and he sends it out. And I never hear from him, rarely. How'd I get this card?
Yeah.
So I think if we're saying, you know, happy birthday or how's your dog or whatever, it has to be genuine, it has to be real.
Yes.
It can't be just, you know what, if I slot this in here on this time at 4:30 and make that call, then maybe I'll get more of a chance of some business.
Let me suggest this. If the birthday card is the only thing that comes in the course of a whole year, you get 1 point for that. And if it's part of a program of relationship building and maintenance, you might get 50 points for all of that. All right? Even if it's just one thing flying out there out of the blue, it's better than nothing. But being part of a cogent program is much better than that. Good point. All right, customer contact, customer education. Here's a question. What do you sell? Louder, please. You sell yourself? That's very true. You sell yourself. It's been said that a salesperson got to make 3 sales. First, you got to sell yourself. Then you got to sell your company. Then you got to sell whatever the hell it is that you sell. But that's not where I was going with that question. Let's put it in this framework. It's some sort of social thing. You're having one of those conversations, one of those what do you do conversations. Somebody says, what do you do? You say, I sell promotional products. She says, he says, what kind of promotional products? What kind of stuff? What does that mean? How would you answer that question? No responses. Anything you could put your name on. I sell anything you can put your name on. While everybody in this room knows what that means, in my experience, 71% of all civilians, that's my term, by the way, for people who don't actually work in the promotional products industry. And I made up the number, but I still believe it's a big number. Most of them would not be helped by that explanation. Now, if you were to say to me, I sell things that you might put your name on, your logo on for promotional purposes like pens or glasses or shirts or caps or stuff like that, that's a better answer if we're talking about civilians, right? All right. Let me ask the question and take it a little bit further, though. You sell pens. What do we call those? We call those writing instruments. All right. How many of you sell mugs? What do we call that in terms of a more general category? Drinkware. We call it drinkware. How many of you sell golf stuff? And what do we call that as a category? Golf stuff is probably good enough. Is it fair to say that we could look at the broad promotional products product line and assign pretty much all of it into 10 or 12 main categories? Could we do that? Or maybe it only needs to be 8, or maybe it needs to be 27, I don't know, some number of categories. Sir?
I think you can put it into 1.
But I don't want to put it into 1, that's the thing.
You don't want to?
I don't want to put it into 1. Hang in with me. Because here's my idea. And for the sake of discussion, let's say it's 12 categories, okay? I want to go back to the intervals. And I want to go back to, I think I said make a list of your customers. Make that list in a spreadsheet, Microsoft Excel or whatever, Google Sheets. And not because we're going to do any calculation, just because they got the nice lines and columns and stuff like that. In the first column, list the names of all of your customers, the names of all of the companies that you do business with. In the second column, list the name of the individual person who actually is your customer. By the way, is this a fair statement? Your customers are not companies. Your customers are the individuals within those companies who buy from you. When I talk about companies, I like to use the word account. When I use the word customer, I'm talking about the individual person. So I'm thinking with some of your accounts, you have multiple customers, right? So I think that means that if you have 3 different customers at ABC company, that means that we need 3 separate lines on this list, on this spreadsheet for ABC company. ABC number 1, Fred Flintstone. ABC line 2, Barney Rubble. ABC line 3, Wilma. Thank you very much. All right. The first line is the company. The second line is the column. I'm sorry. The first column is the company name. Second column is the individual name. The third column, I would suggest, is the individual's title. Do you know why I think it's important to know people's titles? Because if you know which titles you're selling to, that gives you some insight into which titles you should also be talking to in any given company. How many of you sell to marketing people? Human resources people? Facilities managers? How many of you are selling to companies that have people in all 3 of those titles, but you're not selling to all of them yet? If that's the case, I want to know why. I just want you to be aware of where the business comes from in terms of departments so that you know where to go in a company. I'll come back to that a little bit further along. So that takes us through columns 1, 2, and 3. Column 4 is the interval. And then column 5, going on to the right, let's put the titles, the headings of each of these categories of promotional products that we're breaking the whole overall product line down into. So here's what you do now. Customer number 1. You go right across the list. Maybe column 1 is writing instruments. Do they buy that from me? Yes, they do. Check. Column number 2 is maybe drinkware. Do they buy that from me? No. Column number 3 is golf stuff. Do they buy that from me? No. You might end up with a picture of the 5 or 6 different categories that they are buying from you. But I hope you'll see the real value here is the process of elimination piece. Now this tells you what things that they're not buying from you. And then, when you've got to make one of these interval calls, I think you have a customer education opportunity. If they're not buying drinkware from you, I think you should talk to them specifically about drinkware. Now, this is where a lot of promotional product salespeople would make a classic mistake, and this is where I was going when I said I wanted to be more than one group. A lot of people would go to their customer and they might say, so what other kind of promotional products do you buy? And that's a really bad question because it leaves it up to them to define your product line. And I don't know about you folks, this is a huge product line. You sell an amazing quantity, amazing variety of stuff. I wouldn't want to leave it up to them to decide whether I do or don't, or should or shouldn't be their supplier for something. You're in much better shape if you go out to somebody and say, do you have any specific interest in this? And you might say, I've done some research on your purchases over the years, and I've learned that you buy a lot of A from us. You've bought a little B from us. You've never bought any C from us. Do you have any interest, any need, any application for product C in your business? Now, if you will embrace this strategy, I feel pretty confident in telling you that there's only 3 ways in which they're likely to respond. I mean, there's basically only 3 answers to a question like that. And the first possibility, sadly, is, oh God, no, we've never bought any C, we don't want to buy any C, we'd rather die than ever get involved with any of that stuff. Sometimes they just don't want drinkware. You know, sometimes there's just no application for that particular product. But you know what else you might hear? And this has also proven to be a fairly common response. I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know I could get that from you. And sometimes it gets even better. Sometimes it's, I didn't know I could get that from you, and that really excites me because I've been buying a lot of that stuff from somebody else and I hate them and I love you. Remember that thing about when I get really excited when I learn that I can buy more stuff from the people that I like and the people that I trust? All right, the third possible response. The third possible response is, I don't buy any of that, but I can tell you who does. And that's my segue into the third level of value. The third level of value, which is the value of influence. Here we are talking about referrals and testimonials, and we're talking about networking. Let's start with referrals. And let me ask this question. How many of you have gained a new customer recently through a referral? Many of you, most of you. Good. But now I got to ask this question. Was it the kind of referral where somebody says something to somebody without you really being aware of it, and maybe somebody says something to somebody else? The result of all of this is that somebody calls you and ends up buying something from you? Was it that kind of referral? Or was it the kind of referral where you specifically pursued referrals with your customers? Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. Okay. First of all, there's nothing wrong with getting the passive referrals. We love when that happens. But if you are not also looking for what I call active referrals, you're missing a huge opportunity. So if somebody says to you, I don't buy any of that stuff, but I can tell you who does, what an opportunity. But here's another question for you. Let's say, you're not waving at me, right? Okay, sorry about that. If you are given a referral, if you were to learn that Wilma Flintstone over in Human Resources does buy a lot of that stuff, what would your next step be? I hope that your next step would not be to call on Wilma. I hope that your next step would be to ask the person who gave you Wilma's name if you could provide me with, and I'm asking this question, is there anything better than a referral? An introduction, that's exactly what I was going for. Even with a referral, sometimes your first contact, I'm not saying that it's cold, but I'm not saying that it's really, really, really warm either. By the way, here's a lesson that I also learned very early on in my career. I used to play basketball back in my Moore days. I used to play basketball with this guy who told me about this other guy who he knew bought a lot of business forms. He said, you should talk to this guy. He buys tons of your stuff. So I get all excited and I call the guy right up on the phone and I said, Tommy Boren told me that I should call on you. And the guy on the phone says, Tommy Boren? Tommy Boren, a comment about who exactly this guy was. And then he said, you know, I don't like Tommy Boren. And so far, I'm not sure I have any reason to like you. Be aware that the quality of a referral does have something to do with the relationship between the referrer and the referee. Anyways, referrals are good. Introductions are better. Do we agree on that? And here's another of the classic mistakes that too many salespeople seem to make. They'd go out to their customer and again say, who else here buys promotional products? On one hand, it's not completely passive, it is proactive, I like it there, but it's not the right question. Because, two reasons because. One of which is that the bigger any company is that you might be doing business with, the less likely it is that any left hand is going to know what any right hand is actually doing, right? The person you talk to may not have good information for you about what other people might be doing. And then the second reason is, again, this is leaving it up to them to define your product line. And now this takes us back to the reason why I think it's so important to know the titles of the people that you are selling to. Because I think the wrong question would be, who else here buys what I sell? I think the right question, if you're talking to marketing and you've not yet talked to human resources, I think the right question would be, who's in charge of human resources? And then once you've got that name, we're going to see if we can get an introduction, right? All right, networking. We've talked a little bit about internal networking. How many of you are doing enough external networking? How many of you are trying to build your relationships out in the community? Some of you are. Most of you maybe not so enthusiastic about that yet. Don't leave this room, because I think before the end of the day, you're going to get some very powerful thoughts on how to do that more effectively. For now, I got signaled that my time was up. Any quick questions before we go? Then thank you very much for letting me be part of your program.